Look under the bride's veil. True horror story from Kazakhstan. The wedding guest that had no face. True scary story. What happens when you marry a jinn? Real Asian horror. Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. Today we are traveling deep into the vast, wind-swept steppes of Central Asia, specifically Kazakhstan and Kyrgyzstan. This is a land of ancient nomadic traditions, endless horizons, and folklore that dates back thousands of years. But hidden within the beauty of the Silk Road culture is a terrifying entity known as the Basti. She is a demon of the hearth, a shapeshifter often associated with the most vulnerable and sacred moments in a family's life, particularly weddings and childbirth. In the stories you are about to hear, the joyous occasion of a marriage turns into a nightmare when an uninvited guest decides to join the family. There is one specific account coming up later where a groom realizes the woman sitting next to him at the head table isn't the woman he proposed to, and the realization comes too late. Stick around until the very end of the video, because I'm going to break down the specific cultural rules regarding the Basti and why locals believe you must never leave a new bride alone in the dark. Let's get into the stories. Our first story comes from a young woman named Aygerim living in Almaty. She was preparing for her wedding, a modern affair, but one that still respected the old traditions. In Kazakh culture, the kelin, or the new bride, is the center of attention, but she is also considered spiritually vulnerable. Aygerim's grandmother insisted that she wear a specific silver amulet, a tumar, pinned to her dress at all times to ward off the evil eye. Aygerim thought it was just superstition, old village tales that didn't apply in a high-rise apartment in the city. 3 days before the wedding, Aygerim was alone in her apartment. Her fiancé was staying with his parents, respecting the tradition of separation before the ceremony. It was raining heavily, a summer storm that battered the windows of her 9th-floor unit. Around 2 in the morning, she woke up to the sound of water dripping. She assumed a pipe had burst or a window was left open. She got out of bed, walking into the hallway. The floor was dry. The sound seemed to be coming from the living room. When she entered the living room, the dripping stopped, but the air was thick, smelling of wet wool and something metallic, like old copper. Standing in the corner of the room, near the balcony door, was a figure. It looked like a woman, draped in heavy traditional layers, but the fabrics were tattered and yellowed with age. Aygerim froze, thinking an intruder had broken in. She reached for the light switch, but the bulb popped with a sharp hiss as soon as she flicked it. In the darkness, she heard a voice. It wasn't speaking, it was humming a lullaby, a very old tune her grandmother used to hum. Aygerim backed away, grabbing a heavy vase for protection. She shouted, asking who was there. The figure didn't move, but the humming stopped. Then, a long, pale arm extended from the rags, pointing directly at Aygerim's stomach. Aygerim felt a sharp, burning pain in her abdomen, like a needle piercing her skin. She collapsed, gasping for air. When she looked up, the corner was empty. The smell of wet wool lingered. The next morning, she had a bruise on her stomach in the shape of 3 long fingers. Her grandmother turned pale when she saw it. She told Aygerim that the Basti had marked her, trying to claim her fertility before the marriage even began. They spent the next 2 days burning a draspan, a sacred herb, to cleanse the apartment. Aygerim got married, but she says to this day, when it rains, she can still smell that wet wool in her home. That experience in the city was terrifying, but out in the open steppes, there is nowhere to hide. This next account comes from a man named Ruslan, who works as a long-haul driver, but grew up in a small village near the border. This happened in the late 90s when he was just a teenager attending his older brother's wedding. The wedding was a massive event, held in a series of large yurts set up on the pasture. Hundreds of guests, horses, and endless food. Ruslan's job was to watch the horses at night while the adults celebrated inside. The steppe at night is pitch black. The only light comes from the stars and the glow of the fires near the yurts. Around midnight, the celebration was at its peak. Ruslan was sitting by the corral when he noticed one of the horses, a calm mare, was trembling and sweating. He stood up to check on the animal. As he stroked the horse's mane, he heard a soft, crunching sound coming from the darkness beyond the light of the fires. It sounded like someone walking on dry grass, but the rhythm was wrong. It was too heavy. Ruslan called out, thinking it was a drunk guest stumbling away to relieve themselves. No answer. He took a flashlight and shined it into the void. The beam cut through the dust and landed on a woman standing about 50 feet away. She was wearing a bridal gown, a saukele, the tall, conical hat of a Kazakh bride. But his brother's bride was inside the main yurt, laughing and drinking tea. This woman stood with her back to him. Her hair was long, dragging on the ground, which is a massive taboo in their culture. Ruslan shouted, asking if she was lost. The woman's head snapped back at an impossible angle, looking at him upside down. Her face was yellow, like old parchment, and her eyes were just dark, empty sockets. She smiled, and Ruslan saw that her teeth were made of iron. He dropped the flashlight and ran back to the main yurt, screaming. The elders rushed out with whips and torches. They found nothing but disturbed earth where the woman had stood. The next day, the mare Ruslan had been petting was found dead, drained of blood, without a single wound on its body. The elders said the Basti had come for the bride, but took the horse instead, because Ruslan had interrupted her. It is strange how these entities seem to mimic the appearance of the bride. It is a form of mockery, or perhaps a way to infiltrate the family unnoticed. This third story takes us to a more recent event, in a Soviet-era apartment block in Bishkek. A young couple, Nurlan and Saule, had just completed their nikah, the religious marriage ceremony. They were tired and happy, settling into their first home together. The apartment was on the 4th floor, accessible only by a dim, concrete stairwell. It was late, past 3 in the morning, and they were finally asleep. Nurlan woke up because the bed felt empty. He reached out, but Saule wasn't there. He saw the bathroom light was on, the door slightly ajar. He called out to her, asking if she was okay. From the bathroom, he heard her voice, sounding strained, saying she was fine, just feeling a bit sick from the rich food. He lay back down, waiting for her. 10 minutes passed, then 20. Nurlan got worried. He got up and walked to the bathroom. He pushed the door open. The bathroom was empty. The light was buzzing, illuminating the white tiles, but his wife wasn't there. Confused, he turned around and saw the front door of the apartment was wide open. Panic set in. He ran out into the stairwell, shouting her name. He heard footsteps running up the stairs towards the roof access. He sprinted up 2 flights of stairs and burst onto the roof. There, standing near the edge, was Saule. She was staring at the city lights, swaying back and forth. Nurlan approached her slowly, terrified she might fall. He grabbed her shoulder and spun her around. It was Saulé, but her eyes were rolled back into her head, showing only the whites. Her mouth was moving, whispering words in a language he didn't recognize. Suddenly, she collapsed into his arms. He carried her back down. When she woke up the next morning, she had no memory of leaving the bed. She said she had been dreaming that a yellow woman was sitting on her chest, suffocating her, and then dragging her by a silver chain towards the sky. They moved out of that apartment a month later because Saulé kept finding long yellow hairs on her pillow every morning. The fear of the yellow woman is pervasive, but sometimes the horror isn't spectral. It's physical. This next story was sent in by a woman who wishes to remain anonymous, concerning her cousin's wedding in a rural district near Shymkent. The wedding had gone on for 3 days. The final ceremony involved the unveiling of the bride, the Beta Shar. The bride, let's call her Gulnara, had been acting strange all morning. She was lethargic, her skin was cold to the touch, and she refused to eat. Her mother thought it was just exhaustion and nerves. They dressed her in the heavy velvet gown and the veil that covered her face completely. During the ceremony, the Akin, the improvisational poet and singer, plays the dombra and introduces the bride to her new relatives. The bride has to bow to each group. Gulnara was bowing, but her movements were jerky, unnatural, like a puppet on strings. The guests started whispering. The groom looked concerned, whispering to his mother that something was wrong. When the moment came to lift the veil with the tip of the dombra, the music stopped. The poet lifted the fabric. Underneath, Gulnara's face was twisted in a rictus of terror, her jaw locked open as if she were screaming silently. But that wasn't the worst part. Her eyes were fixed on something standing directly behind the groom. The groom turned around. Standing in the crowd of relatives was a woman nobody recognized. She was tall, incredibly thin, wearing a dress that looked like it was from the 1920s. She was smiling at Gulnara. As soon as the groom made eye contact with this stranger, the stranger winked and simply stepped backward, disappearing behind a group of elders. When they looked for her, she was gone. Gulnara collapsed right there. She fell into a coma for a week. When she woke up, she was different. She was cold, distant, and had lost her ability to speak clearly. The family believes the woman in the crowd was a Zhestirnak or an Albasti, who stole Gulnara's soul at the moment of the unveiling, leaving only a shell behind. The marriage didn't last a year. Our final story is perhaps the most disturbing because of how it ends. It comes from a man named Timur. He was the groom. Timur and his wife, Dana, were not superstitious. They were modern, educated people living in the capital. They decided to skip the big traditional wedding and just have a small ceremony and a honeymoon in a remote, luxury cabin in the mountains. It was winter and the snow was deep. On their first night in the cabin, a blizzard hit. The power flickered and went out. They lit candles and tried to make the best of it. They were drinking wine by the fireplace when they heard a knock at the heavy wooden door. It was impossible for anyone to be up there in this weather. Timur grabbed a fire poker and went to the door. He looked through the peephole but saw nothing but swirling snow. He went back to the couch. Dana was laughing, saying it was just the wind. But then the knocking came again, louder. 3 distinct raps. Timur went back. This time, through the peephole, he saw a young woman standing in the snow, wearing only a thin white dress. She looked frozen, blue-lipped. Timur's instinct was to help. He unlocked the deadbolt and opened the door. The wind howled, blowing snow into the hallway. The porch was empty. There was no woman, no footprints in the fresh snow, just the storm. Confused and spooked, he slammed the door and locked it. He turned around to go back to Donna. She was standing by the fireplace, her back to him. He asked her if she saw the woman. Dana didn't answer. She was staring into the fire. Timur walked closer. He noticed something odd. Dana's hair, which she had cut short into a bob just for the wedding, was suddenly long, reaching down to her waist. It was matted and wet. Timur stopped. He whispered her name. The woman by the fire turned around. It was Dana's face, but the expression was wrong. It was predatory. Her eyes were yellow in the candlelight. She smiled, and her voice was a deep, guttural growl that vibrated in Timur's chest. She said, "You invited me in." Timur ran. He grabbed his keys and ran out into the blizzard, scrambling into his car. He drove blindly down the mountain road, sliding on the ice, terrified out of his mind. He made it to the nearest ranger station and collapsed. When the rangers went back to the cabin the next morning, they found it empty. There was no sign of Dana, no footprints leading away, just Timur's wine glass shattered on the floor. The police investigated for months. They suspected Timur of foul play, but there was no evidence. They never found a body. Timur lives alone now. He was cleared of any crime, but he knows the truth. He thinks he escaped, but sometimes when he looks in the mirror, just for a split second, he sees yellow eyes staring back at him from his own reflection. He realizes the irony now. He didn't escape the cabin alone. Whatever that thing was, whatever took his wife's shape, it didn't stay in the mountains. It came with him. So, what is the Basti? In Central Asian folklore, specifically Kazakh and Kyrgyz mythology, the Basti is a female demon. She is often depicted as a yellow or blonde woman with sagging breasts, sometimes throwing them over her shoulders. She is the enemy of pregnant women and new brides. The cultural belief is that during the 40 days after a birth or a wedding, the woman is in a transitional state, existing between two worlds. This makes her visible to spirits. The tradition of kalza, or keeping a light on at all times and never leaving the bride alone, is strictly to prevent the Basti from entering. The belief is that if the Basti catches a woman alone, she will strike her lung or liver, causing illness or death. From a rational perspective, these stories can often be attributed to the immense stress and exhaustion of traditional weddings. Sleep deprivation, dehydration, and the pressure of new social roles can lead to hallucinations. The old hag syndrome, or sleep paralysis, explains the feeling of a heavy weight on the chest. In the isolation of the steppes or the mountains, the wind sounds like voices, and pareidolia makes us see faces in the dark. But then again, when you are out on the steppe, miles from the nearest light, and you hear that crunching on the dry grass, science offers very little comfort. What do you think happened to Dana in that cabin? Let us know in the comments below. And don't forget to subscribe for more true ghost stories from across Asia.